All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. That's right, we have a Matt Law special here for you on a Wednesday. Matt, how are you doing? Good to have you back.
Yeah, good. I feel like I'm always saying this to you. You must think I'm always taking holiday, but I had a week off. Been back for a few days, so yeah, all good. But I kept in touch with everything. I didn't go anywhere, so I've been across everything this time.
Well, you know, us Americans are jealous of the British holiday calendar. You guys are doing it right. How was it? Did you actually do anything fun? What happened?
No, it's a lot of childcare and jobs. A lot of childcare and jobs. It was a half
Yeah.
term for my kids. Bit of Halloween activity, which they enjoy and I don't really enjoy. But yeah.
Did you or did you not get dressed up as John McGinn? Go.
I did not. I did not dress up as anything. I wandered around the
Come
streets with my kids
on.
dressed up. I know. Easy chance
Matt,
missed, eh?
the people do want to know what is your go-to Halloween costume if you've ever
Oh,
participated.
I am the
What's been the
no. See,
one?
I am the worst person to ask on this. I hate Halloween. In
Come
England, in my
on.
childhood, Halloween just wasn't a thing. It was an event designed for kids to egg people's houses or smash people's windows rather than celebrate at all. It's changed a lot these days, and my kids love it. It's kind of
Uh,
second or third behind Christmas and Easter for my kids, but I begrudgingly sort of let them go for it and help them. But yeah, otherwise it's not for me. So I literally don't have one. I literally do not have
all right, well, we got next year, Matt. Next year, the
one.
people will help. We'll get it going. Look, you guys know the deal at this point. Thank you to this awesome community for helping grow this podcast into something really special. Of course, if you can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, do a 5-star review, helps us get seen by more people. Don't blame me. It's just the way the platforms work. Similarly, on YouTube, we're doing a lot of YouTube specials right now. Just produced one on the Chelsea women and their results against Everton. So if you want to go view that, go over to YouTube, hit the bell icon. Sam is writing some excellent Discord newsletters right now. Go sign up for those. And then finally, Discord is absolutely on fire right now. Lots of good stuff in there. So those are all the ways to support us. Matt, we're going to dive right in with just, it's been a minute since we last talked. A little bit of progress under Maresca. Chelsea currently sit fourth in the Premier League table. 10 matches played, 20 goals scored, 12 goals conceded, and 16 assists for those 20 goals. So kind of inferring some team football building here. Sofa Score rates Chelsea's Premier League performances on average at like a roughly 7 out of 10, which is, I think, relatively fair. Uh, they are cruising in the UEFA Conference League. We lovingly refer to this competition, Matt, as the UECL here on the show. In the UECL, only 2 games played. The next one coming tomorrow as you're listening to the show. 8 goals scored, 3 conceded, 6 assists for those 8 goals. And then unceremoniously dumped out of the League Cup last week as well. These are all kind of roughly 7 out of 10 performances in each
Yeah.
competition so far. I guess first and foremost, do you think 7 out of 10 is roughly the right score if you had to give it out of 10 score so far?
I might go a tiny bit higher if I'm allowed 0.5, so I might go 7.5, something like that. Given they've cruised the UECL, as you call it, and they're sitting in fourth place after 10 games. 10 games is always the time when we're told to sort of take stock. Always told it's a bit too early before 10 games. So, and given that the last 2 seasons they've had really slow, poor starts, which has really left them with a problem for the rest of the season. Yeah, 7.58, anything around that, I think would be fair.
If anything, what surprised you the most about the first, I'm calling this the first 14 total matches here with all
Yeah.
competitions?
I think the thing that's really surprised me the most, and it probably boils down more to the league, is the way Enzo Maresca has settled very quickly on a first team. We've seen what he's done with the sort of A team and the B team between the cups. And the A team, there's been a little bit of shuffle in obviously midfield and wing, but it's been very clear what his kind of first team has been really, and given the size of the squad, the fact that there was a heavy turnover of players again, and the fact he's a new coach, it surprised me at how quickly that is. And I think that's been really important for their start, that there's been a clarity there and that there's been a consistency in the selection. And I think that's reflected in the way that there's been some sort of consistency in performance and results, not top level consistency as in necessarily challenging for the title, but a consistency that's really helped them to fourth. And that's probably surprised me because I thought there'd be a lot more chopping and changing to start with, and that it would take him a while to find his sort of best 9, 10, 11. And he's got there pretty quick, actually.
Yeah, I think that was my analysis too, coming out of preseason. I think I predicted us to finish seventh again or something like that. I was unclear based on the slow starts of the previous couple seasons,
Yeah.
like how quickly they would pick up the principles. And I really do think, you look at the last few games in particular, I think it was, a little bit more potch ball for the first couple of weeks of the season, but you really start to see his principles getting, applied across a number of different touch points in the team. The way that the passing and the moving is going, the players going into different areas that, maybe a little odd if you're watching in a more traditional sort of way. Like it's an interesting system, and he's really getting the players to do their best to apply it. Again, it's only 14 matches, and there's a lot more to go this season, so small sample size relative. But yeah, I've also been surprised at the fast start. And look, it's a good thing it was a fast start, because we'll talk about some upcoming matches that are going to get tough here. Of anything that's impressed you, what has impressed you through 14 matches about the start?
Well, within that consistency, I also think that we've seen with Maresca so far that he's been somewhat flexible. And I hadn't studied his Leicester team in great detail during the Championship season, but obviously when he became Chelsea head coach, I spoke to our Midlands reporter who knew a lot about him and had done some one-on-one interviews with him, and I researched him like you guys have done. And my fear, just from researching him, was that he was maybe extremely wedded to one idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that always slightly concerns me with coaches, particularly a coach who hasn't actually coached in a top flight league before, because you immediately think, well, if that doesn't work, there's problems. Um, and while
What?
I
Yeah.
would
What's
say,
Plan B? Right?
yeah,
Like, what?
exactly.
What are you gonna
And
do?
while I would say the early evidence is that it's clear he is wedded to his principles, which is no bad thing. I do think there's been flexibility within his approach to games and the way he's used different players, and also just the way he's done different things in games. You're never going to see him, I don't think, utilize a low block, as it were, and play on the counter attack. But I do think we've seen different versions of Chelsea within his basic philosophies and principles, and I think that's been good. And I think I like his substitutions as well. I think he's had a clarity
Mhm.
in his substitutions, and he will make changes early. And I think I wrote something a few weeks ago that I don't know where they stand now, but certainly in the early weeks of the season, they were one of the better teams for having an impact off the bench. And I thought his early changes really helped that. He's not scared to make an early decision or drag someone off, even if it's going to cause them annoyance. So I think those two things are probably the things I've been most impressed by so far, and maybe the things that the reason I am impressed by them is that they probably pleasantly surprised me so far as well.
All right, well, we're going to take our first break, come back, discuss a little bit more about Maresca, dive into some overrated, underrated, properly rated, and a little bit on Matt's interview with what I'm calling lovingly Win Stewart. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. Like I was saying, Matt, I think the interesting thing about Maresca taking on Reese, to me anyway, signals that nobody at the club is above his critique, and that everyone at the club can get better. And we're talking about the golden boy, right? This is not, I think Maresca doing the easy way out by any means. So
I saw it the same as you. I think it was. I felt like it was sending a little bit of a message that nobody is above sort of criticism or scrutiny or the will to improve. And you sometimes see this in business and things that you read things about people taking on the person at the top of the tree almost to send a message to everybody else below that nobody is above the standards that I'm setting here. And that was my main reading of it. I didn't think he was trying to attack Reece, and it became clear subsequently when he then talked about Reece, he toned it down a little bit straight away, and that was noticeable. I just felt, like you say, that it was maybe just sending a message that everybody here can improve, everybody here can do things better and work better within what I want, and here's something Reece can do, and if I can say this to Reece, then nobody else can sort of moan that they're being picked on or being treated unfairly or anything like that. And I think that actually is generally quite a good strategy. And I guess Reece will take it in the way it was intended. There's not been certainly any whispers of any fallout since. You're not seeing any stories about it. I've not certainly had any calls or messages saying this might have caused any kind of problems. So it feels like a good strategy. I like it, and I do think it has a point as well, because Reece isn't the traditional captain. You're dead right, and that doesn't mean he can't be a good captain. You can be a good captain in lots of different ways. You don't have to be the John Terry tub thumping captain. There are very few of those around these days, to be honest. That's feels like in a past generation that you got those captains. Most captains now are about leading by example on the pitch, and I do think that Reece has been incredibly unlucky with injuries, but there has been little disciplinary issues with Reece. And that's a part where he needs to lead by example better. So I think there was, substance to what Maresca said, and I quite like it. I do quite like it.
All right, we're going to run down a lot of Chelsea's squad, and I'm going to give you the chance to go overrated in terms of the score. The sofa score is too high. Underrated.
This will take us 3 shows to go through the whole squad.
We're rapid firing this baby. Or you think it's about right. We're going to go properly rated. Cole Palmer at a 7.91.
Too low.
Too low. Okay. Caicedo at a 7.73.
Too low.
Or 7.37, sorry. So you'd have them both up in the 8s, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Madueke, 7.24.
Too high.
Ooh, okay. Odd one, Sanchez at a 7.24.
Wow. I love that, because that challenges everything, our preconceived ideas, doesn't it? I love that. Too high, but I love the fact that it's absolutely smacked us in the face with a figure that we didn't think.
Fourth highest on the team, old Sanchez, but according to SofaScore. Don't yell at me, yell at SofaScore. Nicholas Jackson, 7.23.
Bit low, but roughly about right.
Yeah. Jadon Sancho, 7.2.
About right, maybe a bit high.
Bit high for me too, yeah. Lavia, 6.9.
Low.
Okay, liking Lavia. Fofana, 6.9.
About right.
Yep. Neto, 6.9.
About right.
Colwill, 6.8.
Yeah, about right.
Enzo Fernandez, 6.8.
Bit high.
Yep. Cucurella, 6.8.
Maybe a bit harsh on Cucurella.
I think so too.
Yeah, a little bit low.
I think I'd have him in the 7s.
Low 7s for me.
Felix at a 6.8.
Wow, how do you judge that?
That's a puzzler. That's like a Sanchez. I don't even know.
Yeah. I'm just going to say that's fine, because I can't be bothered to think about it.
Nkunku tied with him at a 6.8.
Yeah, probably about right.
I think it's a little low, but Malo Gusto, 6.7.
Yeah, about right.
A little high for me, honestly. Vega, 6.7. You like what you've seen out of Vega?
Bit low. Yeah, I like what I see of Vega.
And improving Mykhailo Mudryk at a 6.6.
Yeah, I'll take that.
And then look, you have your Batty Shields and stuff like that. Your Tosins at about a 7. Largely these are conference league appearances though,
Yeah.
so take that into consideration. You okay with that?
Yeah, I mean that's why Nkunku's a tough one because Conference League you'd have him very high, but Premier League I know he's not got many
Yeah.
opportunities, but yeah, and the standard of the Conference League opposition obviously has to come into the thinking a little bit.
The burning questions I have for you about the squad, and this first one is the first one. Do Chelsea have an Enzo Fernandez problem?
Does Enzo Fernandez have a Chelsea problem? Um,
Okay. So we're
well,
asking each other questions today. That's what we're doing.
yeah, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this even before I'm gonna, yeah, it's a tricky one because I think Chelsea only have an Enzo Fernandez problem if Enzo Fernandez has a problem himself. I think that Chelsea I don't think Chelsea, just because Enzo Fernandez isn't necessarily one of the first teams on the team sheet and necessarily starts every game, I don't think that that would necessarily mean, even if that carried on for a while, that Chelsea would look to sell him or look to give up on him. It's whether Enzo Fernandez can deal with his situation well enough, I think, is where the problem is or isn't going to lie. If Enzo Fernandez can accept that at the moment the first choice are Caicedo and Lavia, and that he really needs to look at himself and look at his game and fight for his place and try and improve on the parts, then I don't think it's a problem. If he takes it the wrong way and he sulks and he thinks he's hard done by and he slightly gives up on it, then obviously it becomes a massive problem. I'm sorry that that sounds like I've got massive splinters in my arse and I'm sitting on the fence, but that's I find it hard to say that Chelsea have got an Enzo Fernandez problem. It's his problem to solve. It's not Chelsea's problem to solve. And I know people will come back at me and say, well, it will become Chelsea's problem to solve. But at the moment, it's his problem to solve. He needs to get back in that team. He needs to show what he can offer to that team and what he can add to that team and how he can keep a different player out. And that's his issue, not Chelsea's issue right now. Like I say, if he doesn't react in a good way, then the balance will start to swing, and then it becomes more of a Chelsea problem and a Chelsea issue.
I only asked this because it's like one of the more tantalizing transfer rumors I've seen out there. But
Well,
there,
look, I mean, you may as well ignore transfer rumours on
yeah,
Enzo now because no one's paying anywhere near what Chelsea could accept to take a hit on Enzo right now. Let's face it. You
it,
know,
but Matt, it's a swap deal, which means you know that it's definitely going to happen. What if you're Chelsea? Would you take the swap of Tchouaméni from Real Madrid and send Enzo the other way?
no, because bringing in Tchouaméni just causes a massive issue in itself anyway. Because then, if you bring in Tchouaméni, you're going to have to drop Lavia or Caicedo because Tchouaméni is not joining you to sit 1 minute on the substitutes bench, and Tchouaméni isn't going to fit into the wage structure either. I guess. I mean, I haven't done any checks around Tchouaméni, but I think it's a fair guess that he's not going to fit into the wage structure. I just don't see it on any level there. I think that what they need to do is they've paid all this money for Fernandez, and they need to now invest time into coaching him and really trying to work with him. And that's why I say then it's up to him, and
Yeah.
it's purely up to him. And we're going to see now whether this lad's really got the minerals to fight for his
Hmm.
place and show everybody that he is worth the money, or whether, in actual fact, he hasn't. And it will be very interesting to see that. At the moment, what Lavia gives them is that he allows Caicedo to play more as an 8 than a 6, and I think it really helps Caicedo's game. The physicality and the structure that Lavia brings next to Caicedo really helps the team. If Fernandez plays, Caicedo basically has to play as a 6, which I don't think actually is his best role. I think he's better as more of an 8, and the whole structure of the team is affected. And Enzo needs to realise how he can fit in better to that. And what I've always felt with Enzo, that he's an incredibly talented footballer, and if he were ever to play in La Liga, would probably really think he was incredible. But I still don't know what he is. He's not a
Yeah.
6. He's not really an 8. He's not a 10. I don't know what he is. I want to see what he is. I really want to see what he is, and that's down to him and Chelsea to sort out.
My theory of the case is that for a large portion of last season, largely at the beginning, Chelsea tried to build the team around him, and then they figured out that Cole Palmer was really the guy, and
Yeah.
now the whole team's built around Cole Palmer, and you can't build the team around both. And I think that puts him in a really, really awkward position because the stories will be written based on his transfer fee and all this sort of
Oh, of
stuff that
course,
like he's
of
not
course.
delivering at the commensurate level, all that sort of stuff. But I think that is a large part of it, which is more psyche than anything.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to dwell on this and talk about any detail around it, but he has had a few off the pitch things going on in his life.
Sure.
Um, and that does affect people. And let's
Mhm.
hope that maybe those now are at a stage where he can sort of move forwards from a couple of those, and that might
Mhm.
help him. But like I say, Chelsea have invested so much into this guy. They're not just going to give up on him, but at the end of the day, it's up to him now.
Yeah, I agree. What about the dreaded vote of confidence for Badiashile and Sanchez this week? I mean, what
It's
happened
come
there? That
via
seemed,
me.
yeah, it seemed very off the radar.
No, look, I mean, I decided myself, I made a check on Cole Palmer's fitness, and I decided within those checks to just try and take a temperature check on first of all Sanchez,
So we need to blame
because
you. This is what you're saying?
you do need to blame me, probably. Yeah,
Excellent.
certainly on the Sanchez one, you need to blame me. And I decided to take a bit of a temperature check on him and just kind of make a few inquiries, and everything I got back was still that they're backing this guy. They feel positive about this guy. It got pointed out to me that whilst 26 looks old within the squad, that 26 for a goalkeeper is still quite young. I think there's a feeling that mistakes he is making are more down to decision making than talent. Now, everyone can have their own opinion on that, but I think there's a thought that if they can get his decision making just slightly better and less rash, that the talent will start to show through a little bit more. I mean, it was also pointed out to me that okay, you can point very quickly to the Liverpool and Manchester United games recently, but you can also point to the Bournemouth and the Nottingham Forest games of examples where he's possibly won Chelsea some points. I'm not sure about him. I said this to the people I was speaking to that I'm not sure about him. I'll be honest about it.
Yeah.
They continue to back him though, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So let's see where that lands. But yeah, they're not going to dump him or not going to sort of pile pressure on him in terms of they're not going to suddenly make it like this goalkeeper race whereby if he makes a mistake, Jorgensen comes straight in, and then if Jorgensen makes a mistake, Sanchez comes straight back in. They don't want to get to that situation, and I'd kind of agree with that because that rarely ends well when clubs
Mhm.
do that with goalkeepers.
Yeah, I think we're at a stage where two things can be true, right? To both, Sanchez is for me not in the upper echelon of goalkeepers in the Premier League. I think that is pretty clear at this point. We have a large enough sample size to say that, even back to his time at Brighton. And the second thing that can be true is that he's the best that we have.
Yeah, yeah,
And like I think this is something that Brandon's brought up as a goalkeeper, which is like if you're watching the Jorgensen performances, you're not filled with a ton of confidence that he's
mm,
better. And
yeah,
frankly, I think he's worse at this stage. Looks even less confident. Looks even less assured on tight moments on
mm.
set pieces and things like that. And again, you're right. It's not a problem that's going to resolve itself anytime soon. You have 8 goalkeepers signed up in the team, and you have to hope that one of them fucking pans out. Like this is just where we are. It's
I
very
mean,
weird.
he's clearly he is. I'm not sure about him, but he is clearly talented. Some of the saves he can make in his wingspan are
Yeah.
very impressive. He gives
Well, I
me
mean,
heart attacks with his feet, but he can actually still play with his feet, even though he gives me heart attacks with his feet. He
we
gets
I
a
mean,
little
we
bit casual.
we talked about his sofa score. I mean, he's had games where he saved us this year,
Well, this
and
is
then
it,
he's
and
had
that's why that
games.
score must be pushed up because he must have had some games that are really, really high within that. And look, I know he didn't against United, but he did against Bournemouth. He looks like a goalie you can save penalties because he fills the goal so much. Um, I tend to agree. It probably does come down to decision making and a rashness in him that needs to be eradicated. But let's see over a longer period of time. I share the concerns of many fans about him. I'm not trying to sit here defending him to the masses, but I am also willing to take the sort of opinion that he has a talent, and it's worth seeing whether he can improve on his weaknesses at the moment. And quite frankly, what are Chelsea going to do? Are they going to go out in January and spend 50, 60, 70 million to try and get a really top goalkeeper? And where is that top goalkeeper you're going to get? Unlikely, let's face it.
Well, especially for the style of goalkeeper that Maresca. I mean, these played out of the back Ederson types don't just grow on trees. They're, it's a very special collection of goalkeepers. Like, if you want to go just get a guy who can save stuff and sit in his own box and not really be involved in the attack. I mean, you can go get any of those. Like, those exist.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you
Patrick
could. I mean,
still be starting, right? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and look, many people might try and argue that someone like Nick Pope is a better goalkeeper than Robert Sanchez, but Nick Pope couldn't play for Chelsea at the moment because his distribution is horrendous, and it would cause all kinds of problems, and the whole thing would break down. So you're dead right. You're looking for styles as much as talent as well.
Mm-hmm. One that's been an interesting evolution this season, Matt, is that as Reece James gets healthy, he's been now played on the left. Gusto's been played on the right, and Gusto has moved from being a inverted fullback into the midfield to being an inverted number 10, where he has moved all the way up next to Cole Palmer in the formation. Him and Madueke trying to play together. I would say it's seen minimal success to this point. I think it's something new, but it's the advent of Lavia being healthy, having a little bit more physicality in midfield, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And Reece being healthy, having a little bit more physicality at the back spot. Are you Gusto or are you Cucurella? Would you rather see what we saw at the beginning of the season, or would you rather see this Gusto thing?
Well, I think the Cucurella at the start of the season, I think that was working better. But that's not to say it's the long term. It's not to say that the Gusto thing can't become a better long-term thing. I mean, what when you describe what he's doing with Gusto, which I agree with, it's very Tottenham and Ange with Porro. I mean, I constantly sound here. I watch a lot of them, and Pedro Porro and sometimes Udogie, one of them will basically play as a second number 10, and it's very similar to what they do with that. It's very risky. I also wonder whether moving Reece to the left and giving Gusto that role is potentially saving Reece's fitness a little bit at the moment while he feels his way back in, because it feels like he's having to cover less ground, which is probably smart, and he's probably having to make less explosive runs as well, playing sort of in that left back role that almost becomes a sort of third centre back role, or a defensive midfielder role. He doesn't have to move around the pitch as much as Gusto's obviously doing on the other side. And I do wonder whether it's designed with his fitness in mind a little bit, which again, I do think would be smart. I hope it's not designed just to pigeonhole those two in, because I don't think that would be smart. I don't think Maresca's that type. Everything he says and the way he acts, he's very willing to make tough decisions. So I don't think it would be that, and I hope it's not that. It's interesting. I think Cucurella at this stage is better at playing an inverted left back and letting Gusto play a slightly different way on the right. But he obviously wants to see it and try it. It'd be interesting whether he does it again against Arsenal. But yeah, it's been a feature, and I struggle to see Reece long term on the left side. I like I say, my nagging feeling is that this is all with Reece's fitness in mind, and making sure he doesn't have a relapse too soon, or hoping that he doesn't have a relapse too soon.
Yeah, I think to that point too, when Enzo plays on the left of midfield, Cucurella coming in and helping to support that defensively makes a lot of sense. Because Enzo's just nowhere defensively. And so, I think it might just be like a requirement based on the personnel that you have, which is you're trying to create mismatches. The best mismatch you can create in the Premier League is both of the fullbacks playing together. I don't love that personally because if either one of them gets hurt, we're screwed again.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it really difficult. But yeah, interesting to see. Last question I have for you on the squad, and this is one I've been noodling on, and I don't know the answer to, and I'm not sure if you have any insight. Christopher Nkunku is a puzzling case. Um, you would argue that as a finisher, he is in the top two at Chelsea in
Mm.
terms of finishing. Obviously, Palmer being exquisite.
Yeah.
I think Nkunku's probably right there with him. Hasn't had a great last month or so. I
Mm.
think started stronger, has kind of faded. The effort in some of these games I've kind of noticed has been a little off to me. Body language has been slightly off. Obviously, if you're Christopher Nkunku, you come here to play in the strongest 11, right? This is
Yeah.
a really high quality player who has a great pedigree. What do you make of the way that Maresca is kind of moving him around into this B team setup with very limited Premier League minutes?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I expected him to have a few more Premier League minutes by now. Well, a lot more, to be honest with you. And I thought he would be given more of an opportunity to prove whether he could play as this false nine in the Premier League or not. And I did wonder whether Nicholas Jackson would sort of come off of the left a few times to work almost with Nkunku and give Nkunku a chance. Maresca doesn't seem to fancy that at all. I mean, it does speak to how well and how vital the way that Jackson plays is to the way Chelsea play as that number 9. The amount of work he gets through and the amount of running he does and the ball carrying he does and the link ups with Palmer are absolutely crucial to Chelsea attacking wise. And the bits that we've seen in Nkunku, you just don't really seem to get that with Nkunku. You don't get the same movement. He's not the same player basically. And you can't do a like for like with them. It's not a like for like change if you put Nkunku into the middle. But I would agree, he's probably a more clinical finisher, but you lose out on the sort of all round game. And I think you lose energy as well within the team, maybe with him in. He's an interesting case because I do think potentially he's the one who, and this is a guess, don't get me wrong, I've not spoken to Nkunku about this or anyone close to him, but you would have thought because of his pedigree and because of where he's come from and the way in which he was signed that he would be less inclined to accept his lot for as long as some of the others might be in terms of this B team, A team. He hasn't come to Chelsea just to play, Carabao Cup ties and Conference League games against, let's face it, poor opposition, and get the odd minute here and there. Now, again, a bit like I said about Enzo, it's up to him to force his way in. Chelsea don't, it's not on Chelsea to do him any favours. You've joined a big club. At big clubs, you have competition for your place. And in actual fact, there's only really two senior strikers, him and Jackson. So he hasn't got that much competition. So come on, show us what you're about. But you could see that if it carried on, that he might be the one who starts to look at his position and look at his lot a little bit. But I mean, nobody would sit here after 10 games and argue that Nkunku should be in instead of Jackson from what we've seen, even though Nkunku's been very prolific in the Conference League. Nobody on what we've seen would say he deserves a go instead of Jackson. As a Villa fan, I'm in endless debates with people about whether Duran should get a go instead of Watkins. And I might not agree with that, but there's an argument there because of the goals he scored and the impact he's had. There's not the same argument with Nkunku and Jackson at the moment. Jackson is a fair bit ahead of him in terms of the pecking order at the moment and deserves to start the bigger and the better games and the Premier League games, quite frankly. And that's where Nkunku is.
I've thought about this one too, Matt, and I think the puzzling thing to me is, especially in games where I would use United as a great case study. Chelsea are not creating that much against United. Chelsea are off the boil, just not looking as sharp or as tactically succinct as maybe we've seen in the past. This is a game where I would try Palmer on the right and Nkunku through the middle, have Jackson up top, and then pick your left winger, whoever the hell's making the best case for that week. We haven't seen that yet, and I'm curious
That's a good point.
if that's like, because that's really his best position is in behind.
Well, that's a good point, because as you said that, I was about to say, I mean, for a long time we were told that Nkunku's best position is basically a number 10. And since the sort of coming of Palmer, you wouldn't see a way of fitting him into that number 10, but you could. I mean, Madueke, on the scores reflected, I think Madueke's gone a bit hot and cold through the season. I think he's in a bit of a cold spell again. And so you could put Palmer back to the right and give Nkunku a go in his favoured position. I suppose as a manager, is it ever a good idea to move your best player out of what he feels is his best position? Might be a bit risky, but Nkunku
Palmer was
probably.
also more than good on the right last year too.
Yeah, exactly. He played on. He did what he did last season. He scored 22 Premier League goals, basically playing off the right all season. So yeah, you're right. It's not like you're moving into a place where you can't do anything. You're right, because I don't see. They've also said that Nkunku could play off the left. I don't really see that. Not in a Maresca system where he likes these one-on-one players. He likes someone who can beat a player on the wing. That doesn't look like Nkunku's game at all. So he probably does deserve a little go through the middle if they can find a way of doing it and move Palmer outright. But that would surely be a bit of a short-term thing, because you're never going to put Palmer out to the right long-term again, are you? So he is in a difficult spot, but it's up to him. It is up to him.
All right, we're gonna take our last ad break and be right back with a little bit of Win Stewart talk from One Matt Law. So thanks to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, Matt, you come through in what was a kind of quiet international break with some Win Stewart chat. You got to interview the fearless duo, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, about a number of issues from PSR to the club's ambitions to changes that have happened along the way to Enzo Maresca and what happens to the academy talent that doesn't make it at Chelsea and all these things. Give me the cliff notes here. What was this interview like, and what were you hoping to get out of it? Because I think a lot of fans have been waiting some time to hear from these guys about what their plan is.
Well, I just want to give a bit of background to it, because I know there was a little bit of cynicism around the timing, and I get that. And, people might not believe me on this, but all I can do is tell you the truth, and it is the truth, but we'll see whether people believe me. I've been chasing this interview for at least 12 months, for starters. I've been after these two, other than trying to actually interview the owners, which has proved impossible and seems like a bit of an impossible quest. I decided to pivot and really go for Paul and Lawrence. And I've been trying for about 12 months. And it became clear last season that because of the way the season was, in terms of it started badly, even with the good finish, because of Pochettino's future, they just weren't going to do it last season. I tried and tried and tried, but it became pretty clear it wasn't going to happen last season. Also, from the moment they were appointed, there was a message from the club about judge these guys after 4 transfer windows. If you're going to judge them, we're saying it's a 4-window process with them to start with, and we, as a club, we don't feel it's fair for you to go too far in a judgment until those 4 windows are up. So it felt right to revisit this at the start of the season and say to the club, look, this is going to be their 4th transfer window. Pretty much, I can sit here in judgment on them without them talking to me, or we can let them talk, and that can be part of the judgment on the 4th transfer window. So it was agreed very early on at the start of the season, even in principle before a ball had been kicked, to be honest with you, that this was going to happen once the transfer window shut. And then it was just all a case about everyone finding a time when everyone could do it. And there was talk about doing it in the first international break. I was in Dublin with England. It actually was me who couldn't do it, particularly in the first international break. Obviously, the stuff blew up with the ownership battle and everything, which probably didn't do it any favours, but I wasn't in the country anyway. So the second international break seemed like a time where everyone could do. Now, we agreed at a time where they could have gone into that international break and lost at least 3 games in the run-up to it. I don't know whether they'd have cancelled on me, but it was scheduled to be in regardless of results. Now, like I say, if they'd have lost all 3, who knows? Maybe it'd have got cancelled, maybe it wouldn't. But we went into it on the back of a fairly reasonable head of steam for them. So people got very cynical around that. I would just say that fell luckily for them, given how we'd been talking. They were very open. I was not given any subjects that were off limits. I was mindful that I needed to be respectful, as I always am when I talk to people at the very top of football clubs. You can't go in firing bullets all over the place at them. It's just not respectful when they're giving you their time and they're inviting you in. So while you want to ask some difficult questions, obviously, around PSR, around how the bad times or the tough times that they've gone through to get to currently where we are, where we're starting to hopefully see what they've been working towards, you've got to be respectful within that. And so nothing was told to me off limits, but I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to go in just firing, what about Raheem Sterling? What about the bomb squad? What about this? What about that? That it was a broader interview than that, and the subject and the way to talk to them was to do it in a broader manner and try and cover subjects in a broader manner rather than just like I say, firing shots at them. People might have liked me to do that, but I don't think we'd have got anywhere in an interview doing that. It'd have just become a very aggressive state of play. I spent probably about 2 hours with them in their office. I found them to be open. I found them to be genuine. I trusted what they were telling me. I didn't feel that there was any sense of garble. If you read it in black and white, it's not like there's a lot of sort of manager speak or a lot of rubbish speak in there. I do think they try and answer things within there, whether you agree with their answers or not. And I felt I understood what they were about as people, and also what they were about in terms of the job, a lot better than I did than when I went into there. And I would like to have thought I had a fairly good understanding anyway. The other thing I would say is there's obviously a good chemistry between them. There's a good working chemistry. They've not worked together before, but they've known each other for many years. And I've always been quite cynical of whether two people in a sort of one job, as it were, can work in football. And I've wondered that with these guys for a while. And I've got to say, having sat down with them for a long time, spoken to them a long time, I was a lot more confident that they are on the same page and that they can and are working well together than probably I was without having actually sat down with them.
You obviously cover a tremendous amount of topics in here. It's an incredibly good read for those who are maybe skeptical of the current structure. I guess my question to you, Matt, and I hear what you're saying, which is they come off as believable and they come off as honest. Were there topics that they were much more comfortable talking about versus less comfortable, where you were like, okay, this is something that I'm gonna be able to dive into in a future interview and really try and suss out?
Um, I mean, I had this when I interviewed Monchi at Villa too. PSR is a tricky subject for anybody, whether it be Chelsea, whether it be Villa, whether it be any club. And it's a tricky subject for them to talk about because they don't want to say something that's going to put them at war with the Premier League, particularly as the rules are about to change and there's a lot of
Yeah.
Premier League meetings about this. They have to be careful what they say. And so they can't come out throwing grenades at PSR, but PSR they had to be careful around. And it's very clear that they, like a lot of clubs, felt that PSR has forced them to do things that maybe if there was a different version of PSR, they wouldn't do necessarily. And they had to be very careful about how they spoke about PSR. So you detect slight nervousness around anyone in football, to be honest with you, when you bring up the PSR issue and what deals were motivated by PSR or what deals were influenced by PSR and what weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly that's always a tricky subject. I'm trying to think that they were very open, when we talked about the tough times, when we had to talk about the fact that this has been a real rocky road up to where they've got to, and they've had to endure people like Gary Neville calling it the £1 billion bottle squad or whatever it was, and all that nonsense. And they didn't get their backs up. They didn't get annoyed when they were talking about it, and they didn't try to sort of move on to another subject very quickly when we were talking about all that. And also when I started to bring up people like Conor Gallagher and the academy and stuff, there was no sort of rush to move on. I didn't have anyone telling me, let's move on to another, you've asked a couple of questions on this, let's move on to another subject. So I found them to be quite refreshingly open in terms of being prepared to answer questions pretty much about everything, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah.
the one thing I spoke about the ownership with them. The one thing I didn't even really, I'll be honest with you, the one thing I didn't even really broach with them was the ownership battle, because I just felt these guys can't talk about their
Yeah.
owners.
What are they going to say at this point?
I know that they can't sit here and talk about the owners and their bosses and what's going on between them. They just can't. So it would literally be a waste of mine and their time to even try and go there. So that is probably the one issue that I knew that they would not be able to go near, that I just felt it was not worth wasting time on.
Yeah, the two quotes that kind of stood out to me were the last two subjects that you touched on. The difficulties where they say, we're out of that now. We're completely out of that. We've had to make some brave decisions, but we feel the squad and the staff here at Cobham, the manager, the playing staff, are in a really good spot. That's a bold thing to say.
They were bold. They were very, very bold about that. They were very unashamed in saying, we feel that we have got through the shit, as it were, and that we have got through the really difficult periods, and we're not going to go there again. And that is very bold, because there are still things that could come up within the squad that could make life difficult for people. But they're very bold in the fact that they feel that they've been through that process now. Yeah.
And then on the academy, I think this was the other area where I was kind of interested in the commentary, because I think that the PSR implications were brought up, and they said the reality is that if it were all about that in the PSR profit, there are other players and more players that we could have sold as well. There's been interest in other players that we've turned down. Every decision has been a performance-based decision, which people have opinions on, because that's football. And absolutely, with homegrown players, it's always more emotional.
I mean, we didn't name who the player was. I guessed at Levi Colwill.
Sure.
And that guess hasn't been sort of madly denied to me, but we didn't actually talk about.
They go on to say there's a this was in the Cole Palmer Ballon d'Or article, but they mentioned there was a little bit of a question mark about Levi's future when we first arrived, what that might be. They're delighted he's here and he's developing, and obviously a long-term now Chelsea player. That's probably the one. Like, I don't think it's that hard to. I
don't think it's that hard either. They didn't confirm it, but I don't think it's that hard either. But I mean, they made the point that if you literally want to go and crunch the numbers of all the top clubs in the Premier League, that no club really in that top echelon is giving more academy and youth minutes and opportunities than Chelsea are and have been. And then it's just about development, competition, pathways, and it works out for some, it doesn't work out for others. It's not going to work out for everybody. They think they're in a very good place with it, and that they offer as good a pathway as any other top Premier League club do. And when you do crunch numbers, it is quite difficult to argue with that.
Well, I mean, what's not hard to argue with is that Chelsea are in the middle of this gauntlet, right? That really started with Liverpool, went to Newcastle, obviously go to United, kind of have a disappointing results up there. And then now you have Arsenal at home coming up on Sunday. You have Noah on Thursday and Heidenheim on the other side of Leicester City coming up. So it's a big 4 matches for Chelsea. Maybe the easier stretch of this inevitable gauntlet that goes all the way through December, basically. Chelsea Arsenal on Sunday is the big one, though, Matt. And how are you thinking about this fixture? I know we touched on a little bit earlier that maybe Arsenal are not at their peak performance, but they're still a contender for everything. And so, this is a chance for Chelsea to really put a marker down, right?
That's what I was going to say. What we haven't had yet, I thought it was an encouraging performance against Man City. I thought it was actually a very good performance against Liverpool. And it was obviously a very good result in the league against Newcastle. I say very good, 2-1, but it was a good result against Newcastle in the league. But I still don't think we've had that statement result yet. And it's only been 10 games, so we shouldn't necessarily expect a statement result yet. But when we're talking about what Chelsea can do this season, when we're really trying to think about are they the real deal for the top four? Are they really going to sort of push and push? You'd want to see a statement result at some point. Because to finish in the top four, I do think you have to at some point probably beat an Arsenal, a Liverpool, a City, somewhere along the line, even if you only beat them at home and you lose away, because the nature of the league is that teams are going to drop. Chelsea have already dropped points to Palace, Nottingham Forest at home. Villa have dropped points at home to Bournemouth. Tottenham have dropped points away at Palace and away at Brighton. But the team who finishes in the top four, the teams who finish in the top four, will probably also beat a City somewhere. They'll beat an Arsenal somewhere. They'll beat the other teams. Might beat a Chelsea somewhere. They're going to need that somewhere, I think, to actually nail down, because the race for that top four is going to be quite wide this season. I think you're going to have Tottenham in there, you're going to have Villa in there, you're going to have Chelsea in there, and you might even have a strange one hanging around for quite a while who isn't in Europe, like a Brighton or a Forest or someone who pick up points and then only really fall away at the end. So you'd like to see that statement result. And if they could get a statement result against Arsenal, you might even think, okay, we still don't think they're going to win the league, but they might really stay up there for the whole season, which makes actually then dropping down to the top four, a lot less sort of nerve-wracking, that you're not just hanging around in fourth the whole season.
Well,
I would love to
thing.
see them put a market down. And I do think there's a chance. I totally agree that Arsenal are still contenders. They're still strong. They're going through a sticky patch, but it doesn't suddenly mean they're not any good. But I do think they're there to be got at. And I do think there's an opportunity there for Chelsea.
I think that's the closing mark for me, because we've seen over the last handful of seasons Chelsea have a slow start, catch fire at some point in the season, but it becomes that you have to basically go on a 6, 7, 8 match winning streak to get back up into the places, and that's just a really hard thing to do in the league. So the more that you get done early, the less pressure you put on yourself later to get those results. And I would love to not be in a situation where it comes down to the last day to figure out where you're going to place in Europe. That would be a hell of a lot of fun.
No, I agree. I mean, I sense it probably will get quite tight till the end of the season, just because the way the league seems to be shaking down at the moment. But a statement win, it feels like it's been a long time since Chelsea have had a real statement win. They've had some good wins in runs, but like you said, they've come generally end of seasons when the big prizes have been out of reach, or they're already out of the Champions League reckoning. To do it early in the season when they're already in fourth, and to go into that international break, it might send them into the international break in third, but even if they won and stayed in fourth, it would send them into that international break with such a lot of confidence. Then it would just be a great way. Whereas if they play well and lose again, it'll be hard to sort of criticise them, but you would just have that nagging feeling that, okay, it's going to be a season of scrapping out for sixth, fifth, fourth, and see where they land in that.
Another international break beckons, Matt.
Oh, don't. I mean, I cover England, so I still work in them, but it's the worst. It's the absolute worst.
I told Dan I totally forgot that this was the last international break. I thought the October one was, and I was saying that all year. And there had to be a bunch of people who are like, "You're an idiot. Look at the calendar." But I totally thought that we were out of the international breaks after the October one. And then this one kind of creeps up out of nowhere. You're like, God, can we just play some football? This is nuts.
Yeah, so all these it's 4-game runs, isn't it? They just come in 4-game clumps. Thank God after this. I mean, we'll all be moaning about the fixture list after this because the fixtures go insane for everybody. But thank God after this, you're not in this 4. I don't feel like anyone can really properly get going because you just play in these 4-game clumps. And I think that is actually, when you look at the top of the league at the moment, I know Liverpool are up there and they've been pretty consistent. But when you look at City's inconsistency, when you look at Arsenal's inconsistency, when you look at there's a lot of inconsistency, and I think a lot of it is to do with these 4-game clumps and the way it either kills momentum. Clubs build up momentum and then it kills momentum, or it saves clubs who are in a bad run and they can almost reset and start some momentum again afterwards. It gives a very unrealistic feel to top of the league for me, to be quite honest with you. And I mean, actually, Postecoglou was saying after Tottenham thrashed Villa at the weekend that the table, even though we're on this 10-game point where people tend to start looking at the table, because of the nature of the season so far, this stop-start, he just feels that the table's nonsense to look at because of it. And I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think you go from like 5 matches in November to 9 matches in December, and that's going to feel just like overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah,
It's going
yeah.
to be insane. So more
I
to
keep
come.
trying to tell myself that the last fixtures before Christmas, which are on like the 21st or the 22nd, I think at Christmas, sit down and look at the table, and then we
Yeah.
will really know where people are then, I think.
Well, I don't think we have any Christmas Eve fixtures this year, which is
Oh, don't. Yeah, wow.
thank God
I've forgotten
for
about
that.
that,
So there we go.
yeah.
Look, Matt, thank you for joining. We'll obviously catch up with you throughout the month as things go. But
Good
look,
stuff.
Chelsea fans, we're back with all sorts of stuff this week. We're going to have an Arsenal preview. We're going to have a Noah review. Lots of things going on. You know what to do. Until next time, keep the blue flag flying high.